My name is Elena, and I am a teacher. Every morning, I wake up early, excited to start my day. Teaching isn't just a job for me, it's a passion. I love walking into my classroom, seeing the neat rows of desks, the colorful posters on the walls, and the shelves filled with books and learning materials. My students are the heart of everything I do. They're bright, curious, and full of energy, and they remind me every day why I chose this path. At our school, the days are always busy. The halls are filled with laughter, chatter, and the occasional commotion of kids being kids. It's a modest place, nothing fancy, but it feels like home to me. I've decorated my classroom to be welcoming, a space where my students feel safe and inspired to learn. I make it my mission to treat each child as an individual, helping them discover their strengths and overcome their struggles. Seeing their progress, even the smallest step forward, fills me with pride. Last year, something unexpected happened that changed my routine. It started on an ordinary morning during one of our teacher meetings. The school had just hired a new math teacher named John. I noticed him as soon as he walked in tall, confident, with an easy smile that seemed to light up the room. He had this way of making everyone laugh, even during those long, often boring meetings. When the principal asked us to break into smaller groups for discussion, John ended up sitting next to me. He introduced himself with a firm handshake and said, "Hi, I'm John. Math is my thing. But don't worry, I'll keep it simple if we have to work together." His playful tone made me smile, and I introduced myself in return. As the meeting went on, I found myself enjoying our conversation. John had a way of making even the dullest topics interesting, and his sense of humor was refreshing. We exchanged stories about teaching, his challenges as a new teacher, and my experiences over the years. I was surprised by how easy it was to talk to him, as though we had known each other for a long time. Over the next few weeks, John and I began spending more time together. We'd have lunch in the staff room or share ideas about lesson plans after school. I admired his dedication to his students and how he always looked for creative ways to make math engaging. He often made me laugh, even on days when I felt overwhelmed or tired. At first, I didn't think much of our growing friendship. It felt natural to have someone to talk to, someone who understood the challenges and joys of teaching. But as time passed, I started to notice little things, how my heart would race when I saw him in the hallway, how I'd look forward to our conversations, how his smile seemed to brighten my entire day. Looking back, I realized I didn't ask enough questions about his personal life. John never mentioned a wife or family, and I assumed he was single. It wasn't something I thought about deeply. I was simply enjoying his company. One afternoon, as we sat outside during a school break, John told me a funny story about one of his students. I laughed so hard that tears came to my eyes. In that moment, I thought to myself how wonderful it is to have someone like him in my life. Little did I know that this simple, happy connection would soon lead to a series of events that would test my strength, my values, and my ability to make difficult decisions. It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when everything changed. I was sitting at home, grading papers, when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered it anyway. "Hello, is this Elena?" A woman's voice asked. "Yes, this is Elena," I replied, a bit cautious. There was a strange nervousness in her tone, and I couldn't help but feel uneasy. "This is Olivia," she said, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I'm John's wife." The words hit me like a bolt of lightning. My heart sank, and I felt a wave of confusion and disbelief. "John's wife?" I repeated, trying to process what she had just said. "Yes," she continued, her tone soft but firm. "We've been married for 5 years." I sat there, frozen, unable to speak. My mind raced as I replayed every conversation, every moment I had spent with John. How could I have missed this? He never once mentioned being married. I'm calling because I saw you with John, Olivia said. I thought you should know the truth. Her words pierced through me. I felt a heaviness in my chest, a mix of guilt, sadness, and anger. I had trusted John, enjoyed his company, and even started to develop feelings for him. But now it felt like everything was built on a lie. I didn't know, I said quietly, my voice trembling. He never told me he was married. Olivia sighed, and I could hear the pain in her voice. I love him, Melina. I don't want to lose my family. I listened, my heart heavy with the weight of her words. I felt like I was intruding on something sacred, something I had no right to be part of. Why are you calling me? I finally asked. Because I saw the way he looks at you, she said. I'm scared. I need you to understand that I love him and I want to keep my family together. Her honesty took me by surprise. She wasn't angry or accusatory. She was simply a woman fighting for her marriage, her life. I felt tears welling up in my eyes as I realized the gravity of the situation. I'm sorry, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know. If I had known, I paused, struggling to find the right words. I would never have. I believe you, Olivia said, cutting me off gently. But I need your help. I need you to step away from him. Her request was like a dagger to my heart. I had started to care deeply for John, but I couldn't deny the truth. He was a married man, and I had no place in his life. I knew what I had to do, even if it hurt. I understand, I said, wiping away the tears that had begun to fall. I'll end things with him, I promise. Thank you, Olivia said, her voice filled with both relief and sorrow. It means a lot to me. After the call ended, I sat in silence, trying to process everything. The trust I had placed in John now felt shattered. I thought about Olivia, her courage to call me, and her love for her husband. And then I thought about myself, how I had allowed myself to get so close to someone without truly knowing who they were. That night, I barely slept. My mind was filled with questions. Why didn't John tell me he was married? What did he truly feel for me? And how could I face him again after knowing the truth? The next day at school, I saw John in the hallway. He smiled at me as he always did, but this time I felt nothing but a deep ache in my chest. I knew I had to confront him, but I wasn't sure if I was ready for the answers he might give me. The next morning, I walked into the school building with a heavy heart. I had barely slept, and my mind was clouded with thoughts of Olivia's call and the reality of John's betrayal. I saw him standing by the teacher's lounge, smiling at something a colleague had said. For a moment, I hesitated, unsure if I could face him, but I knew I couldn't avoid the truth any longer. John, I called out, my voice firm yet trembling. He turned to me, his usual warm smile spreading across his face. Hi, Elena, he said cheerfully. How are you? I forced myself to meet his eyes. We need to talk, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. His expression shifted slightly, a hint of concern flickering in his eyes. Sure, he said, motioning toward the empty classroom nearby. We stepped inside and I closed the door behind us. The room felt too quiet, the air thick with unspoken words. I turned to him, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. Olivia called me, I said, watching as his face instantly changed. His smile vanished, replaced by a look of shock and guilt. Oh, he said softly, lowering his gaze. I see. She told me everything, I continued, my voice growing stronger. About your marriage, about the years you've been together. How could you, John? How could you not tell me? He ran a hand through his hair, sighing deeply. I didn't mean for this to happen, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't plan any of this, Elena. That's not an excuse, I snapped, the anger I had been suppressing rising to the surface. You lied to me. You let me believe, I stopped, my voice catching. You let me believe there was something real between us? I was scared, he said, his voice filled with regret. I didn't want to lose you. I shook my head, disbelief washing over me. You didn't want to lose me? I repeated bitterly. John, you already have someone, your wife. How could you even think about starting something with me? He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. I never meant to hurt anyone, he said. I care about you, Elena. I really do. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Caring about someone doesn't justify lying to them, I said. Do you have any idea what you've done? To Olivia? To me? He was silent, his head bowed as though the weight of my words was too much to bear. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside me. Olivia loves you, I said quietly. She called me because she's fighting for your marriage, for your family, and I can't be the reason that falls apart. Elena, please, he said, stepping closer. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I stepped back, creating distance between us. It's not just about me, I said. It's about the promises you made to her, the life you built together. You need to figure out what you want, John, but I can't be a part of this anymore. His shoulders slumped, and he looked at me with such sorrow that, for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. I need time to think, he said, his voice barely audible. I nodded, my heart breaking with every word. Take all the time you need, I said, but don't expect me to wait for you. With that, I turned and walked out of the room, my steps heavy and my chest aching. I could feel his eyes on me, but I didn't look back. As I walked down the hallway, I thought about Olivia and the pain she must have felt. I thought about the love she had for John and the courage it took for her to call me. And then I thought about myself, how I had allowed myself to fall for someone who wasn't mine to love. The day passed in a blur. I taught my classes, smiled at my students, and tried to focus on anything but the turmoil inside me. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw John's face, heard Olivia's voice, and felt the weight of the choices I had to make. That evening, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at my phone. I wanted to call someone, to talk to a friend, but I wasn't sure if I could find the words. Instead, I sat in silence, letting the tears I had held back all day finally fall. I knew this was only the beginning of the pain, but I also knew it was the first step toward healing. The days after my confrontation with John were some of the hardest I've ever faced. At school, I kept myself busy with lesson plans and activities, trying to focus on my students and not on the ache in my heart. But every quiet moment brought back memories of our conversations, our laughter, and the connection I thought we had. I couldn't carry this weight alone anymore. I decided to call Maria, my closest friend, someone who had always been there for me. She was the kind of person who listened without judgment, offering advice when needed and a shoulder to lean on when words weren't enough. Maria, I said over the phone, my voice shaky, can we meet? I need to talk. Of course, she said without hesitation. Let's meet at the cafe near your place. Later that afternoon, I found myself sitting across from her at a small corner table. The smell of coffee and pastries filled the air, a comforting contrast to the heaviness I felt inside. Maria looked at me with concern, her warm eyes encouraging me to speak. I told her everything. About John, about Olivia's call, about how blindsided I felt by the revelation of his marriage. As I spoke, tears streamed down my face, and Maria reached across the table to hold my hand. Elena, she said gently, you did the right thing by stepping away. You couldn't have known he was married, and now that you do, you've made a choice that shows your integrity. I know, I replied, wiping my tears, but it hurts so much. I feel like I've lost something, even though I know it wasn't mine to begin with. Maria nodded, her expression thoughtful. It's okay to grieve, Elena. You had real feelings for him, and it's natural to feel this way. But don't let this situation make you doubt your worth. You're a kind, strong person, and you deserve someone who can give you their whole heart. Her words were like a balm to my wounded spirit. For the first time in days, I felt a small flicker of hope. I realized that I didn't have to go through this alone, that leaning on my friends could help me heal. That evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, I thought about Olivia. Her voice still echoed in my mind, filled with both pain and determination. I decided to reach out to her, not because I owed her anything, but because I felt a sense of solidarity with her as another woman caught in this tangled web. I called her and asked if we could meet. She agreed, and we decided on a park near her home. The next day, I arrived early, my heart pounding with nervousness. When Olivia approached, she looked wary but grateful. "Thank you for meeting me," she said softly. "I wanted to see how you're doing," I replied. "I know this has been hard for both of us." We sat on a bench, and Olivia began to open up. She talked about her marriage, about the love she still felt for John, and the fear that she might lose him. Her vulnerability moved me, and I realized just how much courage it had taken for her to call me in the first place. "I don't know what to do," Olivia admitted, her voice breaking. "I want to fight for my family, but I'm so scared." "You're stronger than you think," I said, surprising even myself with a conviction in my voice. "Talk to him, be honest about how you feel. And no matter what happens, remember that you're not alone in this." Olivia nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you, Elena, for listening, for understanding. I didn't know what to expect when I called you, but I'm glad I did." We sat there for a long time, sharing our thoughts and fears. In that moment, I realized that we were both victims of John's choices, and yet we were finding strength in each other. It was a strange kind of connection, but one that gave me a sense of closure. As I walked home that evening, I felt lighter. I knew I still had a long way to go, but I was beginning to see a path forward. It wasn't just about letting go of John. It was about rediscovering myself, my strength, and my capacity to move on. After my conversation with Olivia, I felt a deep need to leave the situation behind and rebuild my life. The weight of everything, John's betrayal, Olivia's pain, and my own heartache had become too heavy to carry. I decided that the best way to heal was to start over somewhere new, far away from the memories that tied me to this chapter of my life. The decision wasn't easy. Leaving my students, my friends, and the school I had grown to love felt like tearing a piece of my heart out, but I knew it was the right choice. I told Maria about my plans, and as always, she supported me. "You need to do what's best for you," she said. "This could be the fresh start you're looking for." My last day at school was bittersweet. My students had no idea why I was leaving, and I didn't want them to. I simply told them that I had an opportunity to teach in another city. Their little faces were filled with sadness, and when they said, "We'll miss you, Miss Elena," I felt tears welling up. I packed up my classroom slowly, each book and decoration reminding me of the joy I had found in teaching. When I finally locked the door for the last time, I stood in the empty hallway, letting the memories wash over me. Despite the pain I was feeling, I knew I had made a difference in the lives of my students. That thought gave me a sense of peace. Moving to a new city was both terrifying and exciting. The unfamiliar streets, the new faces, and the quiet of my small apartment made me feel like a stranger in my own life. But I embraced it. I spent the first few weeks exploring my new surroundings, finding comfort in the little discoveries, a cozy cafe on the corner, a park with beautiful trees, a bookstore filled with hidden gems. It didn't take long for me to find a new teaching position at a local school. The staff welcomed me warmly, and I was grateful for the opportunity to continue doing what I loved. My new students were eager and full of energy, reminding me that no matter where I was, the joy of teaching would always be the same. One evening, as I was unpacking a box of books, I received a message from Olivia. Seeing her name on my phone screen made my heart skip a beat. I hesitated for a moment before opening it. I talked to John, she wrote. We're working on things. Thank you for your understanding and for stepping away. I stared at the message for a long time, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. I'm happy for you, I replied. And I meant it. I wanted her to find happiness, to rebuild her life with the man she loved. As time passed, I began to heal. The pain of losing John was still there, but it was no longer a sharp ache. It had softened into something I could carry. I focused on building my new life, making friends, and finding joy in the little things. Slowly but surely, I started to feel like myself again. One day, while walking through the park, I found myself smiling for no particular reason. The sun was shining, the air was crisp, and I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. I realized that I was no longer looking back at what I had lost. Instead, I was looking forward to what might come next. Life didn't feel perfect, but it felt hopeful. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. The weeks turned into months, and the new city began to feel like home. I had found my rhythm, a balance between work and personal life that felt right. My students were a joy to teach, and the friendships I was forming with my colleagues brought laughter and warmth to my days. Slowly but surely, I was building a life that felt like my own again. One evening, as I walked through the quiet streets near my apartment, I thought about everything that had happened, the love I had felt for John, the pain of losing him, and the strength it took to let go. It wasn't easy to face the truth, to step away from something that once felt so real, but it was necessary. And in that necessity, I had found a kind of freedom. There were still moments when I thought about John and Olivia. I wondered how they were doing, if they had managed to heal and rebuild their marriage. I hoped they had. Despite the hurt, I didn't harbor anger or resentment. Instead, I felt gratitude for the lessons I had learned and the clarity it had brought to my own heart. Teaching became my sanctuary. Each day in the classroom reminded me of my purpose and my ability to make a difference.